Welcome into the Rockies Insider. I'm your Rockies Insider, Patrick Lyons, talking about the 2025 World Series, a true World Series, the state of baseball in Los Angeles, and so much more. How about them? How about them Bronx, huh? Notable 44-24 win over the Dallas Cowboys, and the Broncos have themselves a quarterback. And we've got ourselves a World Series. It's not going to be a sweep, as I had predicted, by the Dodgers. And I do want to mention, too, that on the day that I'm recording this, I'm currently live right now over on YouTube. If you listen to this only as an audio podcast, quite all right. Please leave a review for that. But head on over to YouTube and you can ask me any question at any time. Even if I'm not live, I will respond to that. So if you're in the chat, go ahead and ask some questions. We can talk about the GM search or President of Baseball Operations search. Why is it one or the other? Will it end up being both? I can talk about all of that. But today, October 26th, is actually the 18th anniversary of the first ever game in the World Series played in Denver. I didn't put anything out on social media about it, but game 3 of the 2007 World Series did take place on October 26th in Denver. And we know how that went. 4-game sweep, unfortunately. But we've got ourselves a series here. It's tied 1-1 after game 2 victory by the Dodgers. World Series has been tied 1-1 64 different times. This is the 121st Fall Classic. And the winner of Game 3 has gone on to win the World Series 42 times. That's 66.7%. So, yeah, whoever wins Monday night has very strong chances of winning it. But we know if it happens to be the Dodgers, who are home, that the Blue Jays, who lost the first 2 games at home to the Mariners, they still were able to win 4 of the next 5 games to get themselves in this position. And they're currently in need of just one win to get themselves back to Toronto because they ended up winning game 1, a nice 11-4 victory, a runaway, a 9-run inning that was sparked by a pinch hit grand slam by Addison Barger. Only 4 pinch hit grand slams have ever occurred in the MLB postseason. This is the first in World Series history, and Addison Barger does it against the team in which we think of always when it comes to pinch hit home runs, iconic ones. Kirk Gibson in the 1988 World Series to walk it off against Hall of Famer Dennis Eckersley. And Barger gets it done. He's the 1,642nd pinch hitter in World Series history. And in that one inning alone, I believe the Dodgers scored more runs than the Brewers scored in all 4 games of the NLCS. In fact, the Dodgers only allowed 4 runs against the Brewers in the entire NLCS. So with one swing of the bat, Addison Barger accomplished what the Brewers were able to do over those 4 games. Felix, how are you? New avatar for you. I see you out there doing your thing. We did see the return of Bo Bichette, son of Dante Bichette. He heads into free agency this off season. Is he going to be a target for the Rockies? I don't think so. I don't think he wants to be a part of any kind of rebuild right now, especially with the taste of the World Series so fresh for him. Colorado is just not a place to set down winning roots right now. Long-term roots, potentially, but I don't think it would be wise for Colorado to make that kind of investment when, by the time the Rockies do get themselves relevant and good, they may be paying a lot of money to a player that doesn't fit into those plans anymore. If it's going to be 3-4 years for this rebuild to take hold, you won't know what you need in 3-4 years. You need talented players, and certainly having a frontline shortstop is going to be someone you can play just about anywhere because of their athleticism. But that's 3-4 years down the line of Bo Bichette, who's already had a couple injuries here. It would be wise to invest your money elsewhere right now. And with a very thin free agent market right now for shortstops, Bo Bichette should end up still getting himself paid. And if not paid in a $200 million sense, we've seen a lot of players take these pillow deals where they settle, quote unquote, for less than 200 million, but they have an opt-out after 1 year, which with a really good year, you can opt out and then turn around and get yourself paid. We've seen it time and time again. But before that start on Friday night in game 1, Bo Bichette had not played a baseball game in 48 days. Think about that. Since September 6th, he had not played a game. And then in game 1 of the World Series, he's batting cleanup and he's playing second base, a position he has not played in the majors before. He had played it once back in 2019 when he was in the minors. Now, he managed to single in his first at bat, which set a World Series record. Previously, Hall of Famer Chief Bender, pitcher, got a hit in his first game of the 2010 World Series after not having played in 40 days. So Bichette setting a World Series record there. Ohtani homered later in that game, totally irrelevant, 11-4 contest, just a blowout by the Jays. But if you saw Ohtani, he damn near sprinted around the bases. I didn't see any StatCast data if that was the fastest home run trot, but I imagine it's pretty close. Did he know that the Blue Jays fans were going to get on him at a little bit? They did eventually, chanting, quote, "We don't need you." And that has got to be the most Canadian thing ever. That's a very polite chant to an opposing player. When you think, "We don't need you." Yeah, okay, that's right. Right? I mean, that is true, but it does land on the more polite side of things. If this were New York or Boston, they might hit a little bit harder, saying maybe something about, where is Ipe? You could go anywhere with that, staying, completely above board, but doesn't really hit that "we don't need you." But it was good. It was good, just a little polite, very Canadian for sure. I also found it interesting, and I'm not sure if I stepped away from the TV on Friday night, but it was the 32nd anniversary of Joe Carter hitting that walk-off home run against Mitch Williams and the Phillies to walk off the 1993 World Series for the Blue Jays to win their second championship. Game 2, Saturday night, a 5-1 Dodgers win. Winner of the second game of the World Series has gone on to win the Fall Classic 78 times. That's 65%. That's been the case in 18 of the last 27 World Series, 25 of the last 37, dating back to 1987. And it was a quick game, too. Not sure if you watched game 2. It was very quick. I watched most of the game with my dad, was trying to call it an early Saturday night, and ended up staying for the whole thing. It was 2 hours and 36 minutes. And by that point, Yamamoto was absolutely dealing, marked the second shortest World Series game since game 1 of the 2017 World Series, Dodgers-Astros. Keep in mind, there was like a concert in the middle of the game. There was a big delay. I heard from my in-laws that they had turned the game on and they thought it just was starting late. They thought, oh, I guess the game's starting at 7:30. No, that was the point when they did the Stand Up for Cancer. They had a concert. Everyone's just standing around, milling about. No baseball was played for, was it about 15 minutes? I don't know how long that delay was. Maybe it was closer to 10 minutes, but just having nothing going on, not a great look if you're a baseball fan. But I understand your Major League Baseball is trying to do more than just have people enjoy the baseball. I'll talk more about that in just a second. It was also nice that Kevin Gausman got the love. Gausman got the love from the broadcast crew, bringing up his ties to the state of Colorado. He's a Colorado kiddo. And I did not realize the backstory about why Kevin Gausman had selected the number 34. Now, Roy Halladay, one of only 2 Hall of Famers that were born and raised in the state of Colorado, Goose Gossage, of course, being the first. But Kevin Gausman, a pitcher, revered, of course. Roy Halladay, watched him during his heyday. Goose Gossage, well before Gausman's time. And 32 had been retired by the Blue Jays. I believe it was in 2018. And so 32 was off the table, but Gausman knew that Roy Halladay with the Phillies threw 2 no-hitters in 2010, including one of which was a perfect game on May 29th, 2010. And then another one in October, the first postseason no-hitter since Don Larson. Don Larson threw a perfect game in 1956, the only other no-hitter. But Gosman knew Halladay wore 34 in Philadelphia, and so that is why you see Gosman wearing 34 with the Blue Jays. The one regret Gosman has, and this was said on the broadcast, that he never got a chance to meet Roy Halladay. Did Gosman stay in the game too long? Maybe. 2 solo home runs by Will Smith and Max Muncy ended up being the difference there in the 7th. There was because of that long delay with the stand up to cancer and the concert, I was worried about how the impact it would have on the starting pitchers, but both of them seem to be somewhat fine. Again, you can second guess Gosman there, staying in the game in the 7th, but he was looking fine. He really was. Yamamoto stayed in the game looking fine, and yeah, that ended up paying off. He goes 9 innings for the complete game, not shutout. He gave up 1 run, just like he did with the Brewers in his last start. So that means Yamamoto had back-to-back complete games, first pitcher to do that in the postseason since 2001, Curt Schilling. Should be Hall of Famer Curt Schilling. He'll get in eventually. Curt put his foot in his mouth, made politics about his election or selection to the Hall of Fame, which is just never good. He deserves to be a Hall of Famer. He'll get in eventually. But we haven't seen it in 24 years, a pitcher do that in the postseason. We hadn't seen a Dodgers pitcher with back-to-back complete games since Orel Hershiser did it in his lights-out Cy Young Award season of 1988. Yamamoto also retired 20 consecutive batters, going from the 3rd deep into the game. Longest that we've seen in Dodgers postseason history since Carl Erskine back in 1952. Believe it or not, Carl Erskine just passed away last year. It was the last of the notable Brooklyn Dodgers boys of summer. And so Carl Erskine lived to be a very, very long time. Yamamoto became the 5th pitcher in World Series history to retire 20 consecutive batters to finish his outing, joining Don Larson, perfect game in 56, game 5 against the Brooklyn Dodgers. Grover Cleveland Alexander, Old Pete, Hall of Famer, 21 consecutive in game 2 of the 1926 World Series. Dutch Leonard and Jose Rijo, game 4 of 1990. All but Rijo are in the Hall of Fame. Yamamoto also the 4th to finish the game, along with Larson, Grover Cleveland Alexander, and Dutch Leonard. And you have to think now, going forward, the Dodgers are always one step ahead, but it seems as if they are now one season ahead of everything that they do. It really felt like the way they were able to build depth and load up their roster going into this season, that they were thinking about the postseason, that they were looking at their roster in terms of, well, if we can have enough depth on our team to rest players during the season with an IL stint, then we're going to have our best and our freshest 26-man roster come October. And we saw how in the regular season, I mean, they had the 4th best record in the National League. They were a wild card. They had the 3rd best record. So they won the NL West, but it wasn't pretty, right? There were times in which the Padres were giving them a run, midway through the season, but the regular season was a foregone conclusion, and we saw that because they had to play an extra round, and they didn't really seem to care about it. They were able to dispose of the Cincinnati Reds pretty handily. So, cheat code being, look, we're going to get into the postseason. We're fine. October is getting there is not an issue. It's the slog of the 4 rounds or even 3 rounds. It's the slog of winning all those games back to back after already playing a 6-month regular season. And keep in mind, the Dodgers started their season in Japan. So they've had a much longer regular season than we've seen before. So they're thinking about October. They've been thinking about it since last October, since they won their first World Series since 2020, but their first World Series in a 162-game season since 1988. And you begin to think that the next iteration or the next phase of the Dodgers dynasty and planning ahead, thinking ahead, working ahead, and being better than everyone else is all about starting pitching, getting more from your starting pitching, putting prestige back into starting pitching. It's something that Major League Baseball wants to happen. They want the game's most famous starting pitchers on the mound every 5 or 6 days. And if they're getting Tommy John surgery, they're not able to do that, are they? So perhaps the Dodgers have cracked the code. They've figured out a way to lean on starting pitchers and get more out of them. Now, you have to be successful, right? If Yamamoto gives up 3 runs in the second inning, you're going to see somebody warming up in the bullpen. Maybe even Clayton Kershaw. Wow. Sorry, Dodgers. Your plan of going deep into this game with starting pitching isn't working out. Looks like you're going to have to turn to your left-handed future Hall of Famer into the bullpen. Like, okay, the rich get richer. We understand that, but the Dodgers are trying to get back to a way of baseball where baseball was better, where it was all about the starting pitcher. I know growing up as a kid, looking in the newspaper, that dates myself. But you would look in the newspaper at the starting pitcher, and that's how you knew when you wanted to go to a game. It was based on the starting pitcher. Now, keep in mind, there's been some great starting pitchers in this game, but we're not getting 300 wins out of pitchers anymore. We've got our Verlander, Scherzer, Kershaw. We've got that generation of starting pitchers. They're starting to retire. They're starting to phase out of the game. And the next tier of starting pitchers, I talked about it last offseason, is not of the same caliber. Garrett Cole would be in that next tier. And you look at his numbers and you go, this is, if Verlander, Scherzer, and Kershaw all retired after this year, and we know Kershaw is, but if all 3 of those guys did, you're going to say Garrett Cole is the next best living Hall of Fame pitcher? He is. Nothing wrong with that. He is ticketed for Cooperstown, but that is a major step down from what we've had in decades past. So the Dodgers putting some prestige back into starting pitching, I think that's going to help bring down reliever prices, which is a good thing overall, and could keep the game moving a little bit quicker and allow MLB to sell their game more. Because instead of bullpen games where you don't know who the relievers are and you can't sell, hey, come watch the first inning, Justin Brule is going to throw the first inning, and then after that, who knows? You can't sell that. But when you've got the names like the Paul Skeens of the world and Hunter Green, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, some great young starting pitchers, now all of a sudden it becomes intriguing. Now there's more art that goes back into baseball. And that's something that baseball certainly could benefit from. And I think it could help, increase the amount of viewers for regular season, postseason games, because those are players that now. It's already hard enough to know starting pitchers since they played 20% of the season, and even then they're not playing 20% of the game because they're coming out even at best after 6 innings. So if there can be some prestige put back into starting pitching, that's a great thing. And the Dodgers, maybe they figured that out just a little bit. So going forward, are we going to have another generational player? We already have a greatest player that we've ever seen in Shohei Ohtani. But now do the Dodgers have a starting pitcher, the likes of which, we haven't seen since Greg Maddux? I don't know. We'll see. But if you're Dodgers fans, you're happy about it. If you're a baseball fan, I would hope you're excited. I hope you're excited that maybe we are going to see the rebirth of starting pitchers in the regular season, because I think that's going to make the sport that much better overall. Game 3 probables for Monday night. Remember, all these games are at 6:00. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in LA. And if Toronto or LA, if they can each take a game in Los Angeles, we will go back to Toronto on Friday night for Game 6, Game 7, also 6:00 on Saturday. Game 3, though, Max Scherzer against Tyler Glasnow. Man, we all wanted Clayton Kershaw on the bump. Kershaw versus Scherzer. We should have that, right? Can Major League Baseball decide who the starting pitchers are? Like, no, they can't do that. But that would have been really nice. And I'm not sure if the Dodgers have actually announced who their game 4 starter is. I thought it might be Ohtani for Tuesday night. If so, I don't know when Clayton Kershaw is going to pitch. Yeah, it is Ohtani in game 4 against Justin Bieber. So, what? I'm surprised I haven't done that before, or anybody has. Shane Bieber, Ohtani, two boyhood dreamboats in the same game. Oh no, again, it's Shane, not Justin. Will Justin Bieber be in the building for that one in game 4? I don't know. It'll be interesting. So we'll see when Kershaw is going to get a chance to fit in. If this game, I think it was Evan Drellich of The Athletic, who I saw this tweet on Saturday night. If this series does go 6 or 7 games, this will be the first season in MLB history that the season will begin and end outside of the United States. So, of course, we had the 93 World Series and outside the US. That's the last time it's happened when the Blue Jays won game 6 of the World Series there. I don't remember where the 92 series was won. The Jays did win that series as well. But in 1992 or 93, Major League Baseball was not going out all around the world to start their season to try to be more of a world brand, despite the fact we call it a World Series. But remember, they started in Japan at the Tokyo Dome. So this would actually, I wonder if it would be the first season in MLB history that it starts and ends in a dome. Yeah, I'm sure it's probably happened before. But I find it interesting too that all of this is happening in the same time that we are approaching the World Baseball Classic in 2026. And you started to see some advertisements. You started to see some advertisements for the WBC. If they show it again on Monday night, look at Cal Raleigh's image. It's like Aaron Judge. I forget who else they have. It's not Bobby Witt Jr. Maybe Paul Skeens, but Aaron Judge, somebody on the left, and then on the right, it's Cal Raleigh. And it's not a great Photoshop. You know it's him. It's just not his body type. It's not the big dumper body. It's not. So enjoy that little Easter egg if you do. And I talked about that big break, the 10-minute, at least 10-minute break for the Jonas Brothers playing there. I don't know what that does for anybody there when they're clearly lip syncing, and which that's just how you do it in Hollywood, right? That's just how it goes. But you get the Super Bowl with Bad Bunny doing the halftime show, an international act from Puerto Rico. It's huge all over the world. That's going to bring some eyes. And then MLB, who do they choose for game 1? 52-year-old Pharrell Williams. 1 year after they rolled out a 55-year-old Fat Joe in New York City and a 56-year-old Ice Cube in LA. We know baseball is an old man sport, but it doesn't have to be in every facet. Am I right? I'm not going anywhere. Don't worry. The Rockies insider with me, your Rockies insider, Patrick Lyons, talking about a game that I might be playing at Coors Field here very soon. Maybe it's just in my mind. It's in my imagination. Well, we'll see. Dave Roberts' legacy and really what is a true World Series. This is a special one, I think, in a lot of different ways in 2025. It's Canada versus the US. And, you have the both MVPs of the ALCS, NLCS as international players, Shohei Ohtani from Japan and Vlad Guerrero Jr. from the Dominican Republic, but who was also born in Montreal when his father, Vlad Guerrero, aka Vlad Guerrero Sr. I don't know that anybody calls him that because he wasn't senior when he played, but he was a Hall of Fame player in the Hall of Fame playing for the Expos and Angels, amongst other teams. But it feels like a true global World Series. The numbers are off the charts. In Canada, like 25% of the country is watching the World Series, which, you would think maybe there would be more, but it's hard to get 25% of anything now. 25% of any group's attention. So there's a ton there. Japan, we know, are watching with bated breath, with 3 Japanese born players in Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Shohei Ohtani, and Roki Sasaki. Toss in there that Dave Roberts was also born in Japan and has some ties. In fact, you might have, this did go out on social media over the weekend, that this is the first World Series that there are 3 Japanese born players in the World Series since 2007. That's right. The Rockies were a part of that. For Boston, you had Hideki Okajima and Daisuke Matsuzaka, and the lone Japanese player from the Rockies, Kaz Matsui. In fact, the Rockies have not had a Japanese-born player since Kaz Matsui back in 2007, and they've had only one Asian-born player since then, Seung-Hwan Oh, in 2018 and 2019. And they haven't signed any players out of Asia either. A lot of that having to do with the investment overseas. They don't have any scouts on the ground watching international players. So each year, that more and more players come over from overseas, from Japan, young players, impactful players, guys who, frankly, a lot of them do get underpaid because that's just the nature of professional sports when you're coming from another country, and teams can play that game just a little bit with you. The Rockies just are overexposed in that way, and that could be one of the many areas that they could get better is in that internationals, that Far East market. They do a good job in Latin America, but players from Japan on the big league roster, invest in that. Maybe that's one of the things we learn about with the new GM is this is a good way to invest. We know there's going to be a chief revenue and strategy officer. Perhaps some of the money that gets invested back into the Rockies isn't just in the analytics department, but it's for a scout overseas, boots on the ground to try to improve internationally, because this is an international game. We got the World Baseball Classic coming up next March. There's qualifiers going on right now. And this is truly a World Series. We've got 13 foreign-born players representing 8 countries at least when you look at the League Championship Series rosters. Canada, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Japan, Mexico, Puerto Rico, South Korea, and Venezuela. Puerto Rico for Kike Hernandez on the Dodgers. Dominican Republic for Teoscar Hernandez. Haesung Kim, South Korea. As I said, Ohtani, Sasaki, Yamamoto, Japan. Andy Pages from Cuba, and Miguel Rojas from Venezuela. Venezuela also for Andres Jimenez. For the Blue Jays, Alejandro Kirks from Mexico, Yariel Rodriguez from Cuba, and Sir Anthony Dominguez from the Dominican Republic. So you've got the international flavor there. And for something that we call a World Series, that's a good thing. And we're seeing we're seeing the growth of baseball worldwide, and so much of that has to do with the World Baseball Classic. And I think, as good as the story was for Cal Raleigh and the Mariners getting to their first ever World Series, Major League Baseball, of course, their preference would have been Dodgers, Blue Jays this entire way. Of course, Dodgers, Yankees would have done really good numbers too. Probably would have taken a dip below what we saw last year, to run it back. But even still, a dip from 2024 still might be higher than a Mariners Brewers World Series, right? If you're a baseball fan, you're going to watch regardless. And if you say otherwise, you've got some problems with Los Angeles and the Dodgers, right? If you're a baseball fan, you should not let a team or a player ruin your enjoyment of the sport. And I think for the most part, that hasn't been the case. I think last year there were a lot of Rockies fans, a lot of folks in the Midwest, middle part of the country that, they were impacted by these 2 major markets, saying like, oh, it's Dodgers and Yankees. Oh, come on. And they were really annoyed. They were really upset. I think most baseball fans still watched. If you didn't, again, I think that says a lot about you and how you might allow certain things to spoil your enjoyment. Enjoy, like what you like, like what you like out there. And if you like baseball, it shouldn't really matter who's playing. It shouldn't, right? Dave Roberts, as I said, Japanese born, leading the Dodgers to the World Series. This is his 5th time, believe it or not, since becoming a manager with Los Angeles back in 2016. He's now just the 12th manager to appear in at least 5 World Series, joining Hall of Famers. In fact, they're all Hall of Famers except one, and that's because he's active. He'll get in. He just stepped aside from a gig, so we'll see. Maybe he gets himself into the Hall of Fame as soon as next December. Actually, we don't know who's on the Veterans Committee ballot for Orlando. I'm currently trying to make my plans right now for Orlando in the Disney World area for this year's winter meetings. I've not been down to Florida since, I don't know, it's been a decade, and I haven't been to Orlando in 2+ decades. So that's besides the point. Here are the Hall of Famers that have gone to 5 World Series: Casey Stengel, Joe McCarthy, both from the Yankees; John McGraw, Connie Mack, Walter Alston, Dodgers; Miller Huggins, Yankees; Tony La Russa, Joe Torre, Bobby Cox, and Sparky Anderson also did it 5 times. Bruce Bochy is the only one not in the Hall of Fame. Is he going there? Yeah, he's won 3 World Series, right? Maybe the best dynasty, the only dynasty of the 2000s, I guess, right? The Red Sox have their 3, but it was so spread out that there were really few that were linchpins in all of those. But Bruce Bochy there, he's got 5, 3 with the Giants. Oh, how does he even have 5? He won 3 with the Giants. He won in 2023, of course, with the Texas Rangers. How does he have 5? I don't know. Patrick, I put myself on the spot. That's what I do. I stick my foot in my mouth and I start going down a rabbit hole that I know I don't want to go down, and I didn't include it in my notes, and I get caught out there. Oh, that's right. He won 4, but he was a part of 5 when the Giants lost. No, he was not the manager of the Giants back in 2000 2002 when the Angels won 98 Padres. There we go. So he didn't win it, but he was a part of it. Threw myself off. Totally threw myself off. And Dave Roberts, the 9th manager to lead a single team to the World Series final time. 5 times. In the chat, could we see more Japanese players coming over in coming years? Absolutely. Yeah, there's already about 3 or 4 notable Japanese players that are planning to come over. We've seen a lot more success for these players. I think teams are investing a lot more in Japanese players and in terms of, interpreters, and there's just more Japanese players that are coming over, and they're seeing like, I'd love to play with Shohei Ohtani. I want to test my mettle in the majors. Right. In the United States, it's the best baseball league, period. And it becomes more about that than it does about making more money, because a lot of players can make more money over in Japan than in the United States. Masato Tanaka is a player that I don't know if he's still playing, but after a couple of injury-plagued seasons with the Yankees, he ultimately decided, I'm going to go back to Japan, and he's been pitching well there. In fact, there's a lot of American players, believe it or not, that can make more money in Japan than they can in the United States. More fringy players. They're players who are promised a non-roster invitation at spring training, but if you don't make the team, or even if you do, you could get option, designated for assignment, and then, at best, you'll earn the league minimum. You earn about $750,000 if you can stick around. And again, break camp with the team. You got to play well in spring training just to make that $750,000. But you go over to Japan, you're going to get $1 million, and it's guaranteed. So, we're seeing a lot more. I wouldn't say a lot more, but we're seeing a steady influx of Japanese players coming over. And I think with sort of the next generation of Japanese players, seeing Ohtani breaking records and leading the way, I think we're seeing even a better caliber of Japanese players. And so, if you want a homework assignment, I would say study up on the best players in Japan and really keep an eye on them at next year's World Baseball Classic, because you're going to see players that will play in Major League Baseball. I'd be curious to know, you know, gosh, what was the last World Baseball Classic before 2023? It might have been 2017 because there was a big break. How many of those players from 2017 ended up playing in the majors? I don't know if it would be half, maybe more like somewhere in the 33% to 40%. So between 2/3 and 2/5 of players actually, or excuse me, 1/3 or 2/5 of players from Japan actually coming over to MLB. So we're seeing them coming. That's just a pipeline that's just not going to stop. You have to think that Dave Roberts is very well beloved in Los Angeles. I think he's got a way to go before he's as revered as Phil Jackson from the NBA, from basketball. He's got the 5 World Series appearances, looking to win his 3rd ring, first one back to back. That's a rarity. Phil Jackson is upper echelon other than Red Auerbach. I mean, you got Phil Jackson, 1A, 1B in terms of NBA coaches. Jackson won 11 as a head coach, and then 5 of them were with the Lakers. So this would only be number 3 for Dave Roberts, were they to win. He's got 2 so far. 2020 does count. Say what you will. They were the best team. And Dave Roberts is not going to win NL Manager of the Year this year. He's not. He's only won it once, and that was his first year in 2016. And I don't have a problem with that, because for Dave Roberts, the Manager of the Year award is a regular season / expectation award. And when the expectations are already so incredibly high for the Los Angeles Dodgers, how can you best those expectations? If anything, if you were to look at preseason predictions, the Dodgers are one of the teams where almost year in, year out, they lose more games than they're expected to, because the bar is so high. I think I don't know what all the sports books were going into this season, but I think a lot of them had them at like winning 100 games. They didn't really come close to that. So what, Dave Roberts stinks? Absolutely not. But Dave Roberts, his Manager of the Year award, if you will, his reward is winning the World Series, is going deep into the postseason. He doesn't need Manager of the Year award. He doesn't. You when you win the World Series, you have proven you are the best manager of that season, right? I mean, there's no two ways about it. Now, granted, if you have a team that can sneak into the postseason and is just overpowered, like a Milwaukee Brewers, and you say, yeah, well, Pat Murphy really in many ways was the best Manager of the Year. Okay, sure, and he's probably going to win the award. We'll find that out in the next couple weeks. So sure, Pat Murphy is going to win Manager of the Year award, but when you win the World Series, that's all you need to know. That's all you want. You want to win the World Series. You don't want a Manager of the Year. That's a regular season award. Dave Roberts is about the end of season awards and winning a ring. Dave Roberts was 7th last year in 2024. I don't think he's going to finish in the top 3. Dave Roberts, he'll get votes. He's gotten votes every year that he's been manager. But listen to how he's finished. Again, in the regular season, NL Manager of the Year award. Again, votes have to be put in before the start of the postseason. So this has nothing to do with that. 7th last year, 5th in 2023, 2nd in 2022, 5th in 2021. He only got 3rd place votes. He got 6 3rd place votes. That was it. That was the Gabe Kapler year where the San Francisco Giants won 107 games, most in franchise history. Even when John McGraw was the manager, when they were the New York Giants, couldn't get it done. They did play less games then, not by a lot, but still. Gabe Kapler should have been the unanimous NL Manager of the Year award winner. He wasn't. He missed by 2 votes. One of those voters was from Colorado, and the other was from Cincinnati, and that person didn't even have Gabe Kapler in the top 3. I don't get that. I'm not going to be critical of anybody's ballot, but when 28 people have Gabe Kapler at number 1, one person has them at number 2, and you don't have them anywhere in the top 3, that could be hard to swallow. 5th place in 2020, won the World Series then. He's fine. 4th in 2019, 6th in 2018, where his mentor, one of his many mentors, but his mentor and good close friend, Bud Black, finished 3rd. That's right. Buddy was a 3rd place finisher back in 2018. Bud Black did get one first place vote in 2018, I should point out. And it did come from a writer in San Francisco. Dave Roberts, 2nd place in 2017. So nearly went back to back, which Pat Murphy is very likely to do this year. We haven't seen that, I believe, since since Kevin Cash. Bobby Cox is the only other manager to win back-to-back Manager of the Year awards in the same league with the same team. But Dave Roberts, 2nd place in 2017, did finish one spot ahead of Bud Black. Buddy finished 3rd, received 3 first-place votes, believe it or not. And again, Buddy came in. That was his first year in 2017. Walt Weiss was under 500 with the roster in 2016. And Buddy did a great job. I mean, that was probably the better job than 2018, I think, that he did, because the Rockies really just picked up where they left off in 2018. But 2017 was the one where he got that much more. You saw that boost that Bud Black was able to provide the roster. And he got 3 first-place votes. 1 came from a writer in Pittsburgh. 1 came from a writer in San Diego. And 1 came from someone in Colorado, from a writer that is surely no longer a member of the BBWAA and is relatively disgraced. They've written 2 books that I loved, made some bad choices off the field, if you will. And I've never met this person. Don't really care to. You can look it up if you'd like, if you're so very curious, but I'll leave it at that. Did see there was a strange stat. Maybe it's not that strange, but I'm sure they'll talk about it during Game 4 with Kike Hernandez's start on Saturday. He actually ended up surpassing Justin Turner for most postseason games in Dodgers history. 87. He's up to 88 now, but passes Justin Turner, who even then you go, Justin Turner, the most postseason games in Dodgers history, despite the many World Series that the Brooklyn Dodgers went to. That was the only round. There weren't rounds. It was just the World Series. You win the National League, you go to the World Series. You win the AL, you go to the World Series. They didn't have all of these multiple rounds. So, a lot of these franchise records by these historical teams are held by modern players. And again, it makes sense because of the now 4 rounds of postseason that we had. Even 3 rounds is a lot. That's a lot more than the generation prior, when it was just the ALCS and NLCS, right? You won the East or you won the West, and you went to a showdown for the NL or AL pennant. So it probably shouldn't come as a surprise, but yeah, Kike Hernandez in a lot of games. Los Angeles Dodgers. Los Angeles Angels. Man, they are problematic. I'm really curious. I'd love to speak with somebody from LA. What's the reputation of the Angels right now? Because it's not good. It's honestly not good right now. They're going through a lot of problems. They've got the longest postseason drought in MLB right now. They haven't gone since 2014. They had a payroll over $200 million. They consistently spend but do nothing. They've totally botched the Shohei Ohtani situation. Didn't get him to the postseason. They didn't trade him to get a haul, right? They got a qualifying offer, whatever. Pujols was ready to come back as your manager. He wanted a little bit of certainty, and the Angels decided to pass. And they ended up giving Kurt Suzuki a 1-year contract, which is unheard of for a new manager. They've got everything going on in the Eric K. Tyler Skaggs court case right now, the wrongful death lawsuit going on. You had Yusei Kikuchi at the end of the season coming out and saying that the Angels didn't have an air conditioning in the team's weight room. The GM denied it, and then the next day there was a job posting for somebody to work the HVAC. So the Angels, talk about being a second class citizen in your own town, which, has been the case for the Cubs for many years. Now, of course, the White Sox are in that position. The Mets have long been in that position with the Yankees, but the Angels are very much that. It's kind of interesting that, historically it's been, two city or two team cities. There's one that is doing most things well. Not gonna say everything right, but doing most things well. And there's another one that is, tripping over its own feet. And sometimes they switch, sometimes they take turns. In the 80s, the Mets were the better organization than the Yankees. Now we're seeing the Cubs as the better organization than the White Sox, but for a very long time, the White Sox were the better organization than the Cubs. Cubs were the lovable losers, and the White Sox didn't have a ton of winning history, but they weren't the same lovable losers. They didn't have a nickname about losers. Lastly, I want to talk about a really fun idea that I've thought about it before. Certainly never said anything publicly, but maybe this gets the ball rolling. I don't know. So big tip of the cap to Christian Saez of DNVR and DNVR Rockies. He put it out there on social media. He was inspired by a common practice. I don't know how long they've been doing it for, but in the NBA and for the Nuggets, they have a media versus coaching staff game. So they have a media game, right? Nuggets media versus Nuggets coaches. And the media got blown out. And, they didn't play it at Ball Arena, but still, they got to get on the court with a couple, former pros. And, for baseball, it's something that they do in Boston and New York. They do Red Sox versus Yankees media every year at Fenway and at the new Yankee Stadium. They used to do it at the old Yankee Stadium. And I would just kill for this. I would kill for something like that. So Christian Saez put out a starting lineup, where everyone would play. I do have a bit of an issue about being put at first base. It's really the one position I've almost never played. Once I was done, and I played every position in high school as a utility guy before I even knew that was a thing. My position was ultimately, what's the one spot on this year's team that has the biggest question mark? That's the position I play this year. That's how I found myself getting on the field at third base, second base, third string catcher, corner outfielder. I was always pitching, played a little bit of short. But it wasn't until I was done with high school that I eventually, in the adult men's leagues, picked up a first baseman's mitt. So that was the last one. So you want to use my speed, you want to use my range at first base. That's all right. I will gladly take that. Just to be on the roster was a pleasure. So I would love something like this if we had Denver media versus the Denver coaches. Again, you need at least 9 guys. So I don't know if there's enough on the coaching staff to get that done. You could probably have a couple siblings of players coming out to play. There's always, former big leaguers that live in and around the Denver area. So fantasy camp for the media, sign me up. I'm all for it. No doubt about it. And yes, in the chat, Hunter Goodman, Silver Slugger. I got to dig into the numbers a little bit more, but I mean, I don't think I need to. Just one glance, he's going to win the Silver Slugger award this year, period. Rockies Insider with me, Patrick Lyons. Did you remember from the 2025 season? There's a lot you've probably tried to block out of your mind. I've got myself a new baseball book haul. Yes, I couldn't resist. I added some new baseball books to my library, and I've got a couple awards to hand out for things that aren't officially awards yet. I'll tell you what that is in just a second. But man, there was so much from this season that I think we've all forgotten about. And when I looked at the season in review notes that the Rockies send out, I talked about this a couple weeks ago with Kevin Henry. And we talked about some of those things of like, oh yeah, I forgot that happened. Oh no, I didn't even remember that. Like if you said that never happened, I would have said, yeah, that never happened. but there was a lot that jumped out. There was a lot. The defense being not very good. Kyle Karros leading all Rockies players with 3 DRS, which is wild because he was an A-ball player entering this year. But the two things that I want to really touch on the most is Ariel Amador, because Ariel Amador had a sneaky season, apparently. And not going to lie, definitely didn't keep tabs on him when he was down in AAA after getting optioned down, particularly late in the season. Because in the majors was worth negative 1.1. He's been negative 1.6 B-WAR his entire 2-year career, which hasn't been very much. The 10 games that he played in 2024 were more about Brendan Rodgers going on the IL and just giving him an opportunity. But 32 OPS plus, a 176 batting average, 242 on base percentage, 250 slug in the majors is not great. And you say, like, this guy is supposed to be a top prospect. He's still just 22 years old. On opening day of next year, he will still be 22 years old. So he'll turn 23 on April 11th. But a middle infielder that I think still has a decent future ahead of it. I don't think we know what his future is yet because he is so very young. But in AAA this year, he hit 303, had a 405 on base percentage, 478 slug. And it isn't a hitter-friendly Pacific Coast League. He stole 20 bases, got caught stealing 9 times, more than you would like. 11 homers, 59 RBI in 80 games. So, sure, that is an offensively charged environment in the PCL, but you still have to be able to do that at the AAA level to really even be considered, big league prospect. 16 doubles, 3 triples. He actually became the 13th player in Isotopes history, only the 13th, and not just Isotopes when they've been with the Rockies. No, going back even before that. 13th player in Isotopes history with 10 homers and 20 stolen bases in the same season. Over his final 30 starts in Albuquerque, if you weren't paying attention, if you weren't watching, which, again, I'm saying I was guilty of as well. But he batted .385 with a .487 on base percentage, nearly 500. 656 slug, 10 doubles, 2 triples, 4 homers, and 25 RBI over his last 25 games of the season. Reached base safely in his final 30 starts. So Ariel Amador giving you a little bit of pause and saying maybe there is something there for him at second base. The swing and miss at the big league level, again, too high. It wasn't very high in the Pacific Coast League, but it's easier to make a lot more contact in the PCL. Only struck out 47 times in his 371 plate appearances. So there's obviously been something there. He's still a switch hitter, second baseman that was previously a shortstop. So, we've seen him with some decent range at times. Hasn't totally looked comfortable over at second base just yet, but I think there's still something there to be had with Ariel Amador. And, are we thinking, is this guy going to be an all-star going forward? That we don't know. We're still not sure if he's going to be an everyday regular for the Rockies, but is there that potential there still? Absolutely. It has to still be with what he's been able to do at AAA. He just needs to make that jump. That's a big jump. The leap from high A to double A is arguably the most difficult, but I think, as Bud Black would like to say, going from AAA to the majors is probably even harder because you can tear up the PCL, but once you're in the majors, those guys are that much better. The jump between each level is incrementally harder, but AAA is the minor leagues. The majors are the majors for a reason. You're playing against guys like Shohei Ohtani, who are doing things that we haven't seen since Babe Ruth, even better than what we saw at a George Herman Ruth. So Ariel Amador, I'm not going to say my hopes are high, but I'm going to say that there still should be some hopes around Ariel Amador, and he shouldn't really be looked past. The other thing for this year's end of season notes that jumped out to me, and I feel like this year there was more than in the past, but 5 ejections for Rockies this year. Usually they're around 3 or 4, or 2 for Warren Schaefer. Goodman got ran once. Tyler Freeman in Milwaukee, along with Schaefer. You remember that game. Jordan Beck. But who was the first? Who was the first player this year to get ejected? Do you remember this? And if you don't remember it, it's okay because you might not have even been aware of it at the time. Chris Bryant. Yeah. Chris Bryant was the first player ejected by the Rockies this season. I believe it was the home opener on August 6th against the A's. I don't think we found out about it until the next day. It wasn't until after the game. It might have even been after the final out. Maybe it was in the ninth inning, but Chris Bryant said something to the ump, got ejected. None of us knew about it again until the next day. So you really want to stumper at the water cooler and say, to a real hardcore Rockies fan, who was the first player to get ejected? They might go Warren Schaefer. I'm not sure if that was the first one. I think it was. I think the Schaefer Freeman ejection in Milwaukee was the first that most people will remember. But the real first, April 6th against the A's, it was Chris Bryant. Yes. I talked about the need for maybe a media game for our BBWAA or just Denver media in general. I don't think we have enough members in the Baseball Writers Association of America to field a team. But one thing that we could do as a BBWAA, and in addition to a media game, which I'd love to organize and get something like that going forward, but I'd also love for our chapter to hand out end of season awards. Now, this is something that most chapters do. I should say many chapters do that. And they raise a little bit of money. They get plaques. And at the end of the year, they vote and decide who should win team awards. And, right now with Colorado having missed the postseason for 7 consecutive years, this is the longest postseason, this is the longest stretch that the Rockies have had where they've been under 500, 7 consecutive years. 6 has been the most. It happened twice, 2 different periods, 2 totally separate 6-year blocks, but they've never had 7 until right now. So we know that they're a 1 all-star selection team. We might get Hunter Goodman winning the Silver Slugger Award. That's about it. No MVP votes, anywhere on the top 10 ballot, nowhere on the top 5 of Cy Young Award ballot, nowhere on the top 3 of a Manager of the Year Award or Rookie of the Year Award. So team awards given out by the writers is something that the players would really appreciate. They would, because we are colleagues in many ways. We are navigating the same space in the clubhouse. We're certainly getting paid very differently, but we are both trying to accomplish many of the same things. They're trying to win a championship, or at least get their team to around 500, establish themselves, but they have a story, and we as the media can tell that story for them. So we collaborate, we work together on that. And for us to give them an award like that, has a lot of value. I know Arizona, their BBWA does that. They give out 4 awards, and that's really, probably what I would like for our chapter to do. That's MVP, then it's most valuable pitcher, a Rookie of the Year award, and then a Good Guy award. I'm not sure, but I could have sworn that I've seen in really old media guides for the Rockies that this was something that our chapter did, was to hand out those kind of awards, but it's kind of gone by the wayside, and I'd love to see that back. So for me, I had to think about this, and I could probably do an entire episode on it, but I'm not going to do that. I'll get it to you right here, right now. Who would win the end of season? Who would win the Rockies end of season awards? Well, the MVP, pretty easy. It's Hunter Goodman. You don't have to think about that. He was head and shoulders better and more valuable than anybody else on the 2025 team. He's the MVP. Most valuable pitcher, there's 2. And, depending on one of the awards I'm going to talk about in just a moment, maybe there's some finagling that goes on there. But I actually would have Kyle Freeland over Jimmy Herget. Now, Jimmy Herget had an outstanding season. Probably maybe inside the top 10 best seasons for a relief pitcher. Certainly top 25. You might be able to make the case that it is a top 10 season by a reliever quietly, right? Like not a lot of people were paying attention to Jimmy Herget when they made that move during the offseason. And one of the things I actually said to him at the beginning of this year, and I was careful in my phrasing because I didn't want it to sound bad in any way, but the Rockies have had a really good track record of bringing in relievers that have been undervalued, and they've had success. And Jimmy Herget now is in that line of the last couple years, guys like the Pierce Johnsons of the world and the Brent Suters of the world. So I actually think what Kyle Freeland was able to do as a starting pitcher with his sub-5 ERA, which isn't great, I actually think that has more value than what Jimmy Herget did as a reliever. Rookie of the Year award. The metrics say one guy. I sort of think maybe it's another, but I'm going to give the edge to Juan Mejia over Chase Dollander this year. If you're looking at wins above replacement on Fangraphs or Baseball Reference, Juan Mejia does have the edge. Notably, Chase Dollander was an average pitcher, a replacement level pitcher, but we saw so many bright spots out of him. And again, an average starting pitcher, I think in many ways, in today's day and age, in 2025, has more value, not as much, but more value than a very good relief pitcher. It does. Relief pitchers fall off trees all the time. I just got done saying how the Rockies were able to pick Jimmy Herget up off the scrap heap when the Angels waived him. So you can find those guys, but a young starting pitcher that, again, we don't know what the future holds for Chase Dollander. So, okay, the 6.52 ERA, not great. Sub-4 ERA, about a 3.5 ERA on the road. Really good for Chase Dollander. So he's got to figure Coors Field out. So, okay, I'll give it to Juan Mejia, sub-4 ERA, 3.96 ERA. Was on the mound for one of the more memorable walk-off. Well, it wasn't a walk-off catch, but that one where he caught it, collided with Warming Bernabel. That was a fun one post-game. That was for his first ever big league win. Had one save, 61 and a third innings pitched. Was solid. 68 strikeouts, a pretty solid strikeout to walk ratio as well. So he would get that Rookie of the Year award from me. And then the Good Guy award, there's a lot. I went up and down the roster to double check. And, honorable mention, and Mickey Moniak was great to talk to this year, as was Goodman, Brenton Doyle always, Chase Dollander, Jimmy Herget I talked to a lot this year. Sam Hilliard, always talked to a lot. Wasn't around a ton. Not his fault, but Sam Hilliard's always a good guy to talk to. Jake Bird, great. Ryan Rollison, great. Ryan Feltner didn't get to see very much, but I would probably have to give the award to either Kyle Freeland or Ryan McMahon. And if this were a real award, I'm guessing we wouldn't give it to Ryan McMahon just because he wasn't there for the final 2 months of the season, and we couldn't actually give that award to him. I don't know how that would actually go down. And if Freeland wins MVP pitcher, then it's going to go to Ryan McMahon. But Freeland and McMahon, great guys. And obviously I've known them since I've been covering this team back in 2018. But both of them have stood up as the spokesperson for this team time and time again. In the worst season that they've ever experienced, and the worst season that this franchise have ever experienced. And they stood up. They were accountable for the team. And, they were always good. Even if I just needed to grab them for something real quick and they were running off somewhere, they would speak. Kyle and Ryan, both of them at their lockers as soon as press time was ready to go. Even when there's nothing going on, they would be there ready because that's part of their job, is talking to the media. And so they are good guys for that. Last thing of the show. Last bit of business for the show. This weekend was the Friends of Loveland Public Library sale, and I've been reading a lot lately. The last couple years, I believe it or not, I start my reading heavily in the summer, in the middle of the Rockies season. I guess maybe that's not too coincidental. And I haven't been reading as many baseball books, oddly enough. It's been quite a while, but I was able to get a few baseball books I thought I'd share. I picked up 63 books on Sunday. It was like fill a bag. and depending on the size of your shopping bag, it'd be like $5, $8. And so I squeezed 63 books into 2 bags for $16. It was about 80 to 100 pounds of books. I'm not going to read all of them. And some of them my wife picked up. Some of them I plan to use at little free libraries. I'll go around my neighborhood or just wherever I'm at and kind of go around and see what these little free libraries have. And instead of just giving out any book, I try to give out some Pulitzer Prize winning books, some Booker Award winners, just something good that's an even swap. I was really excited when a couple weeks ago I found, like in back-to-back days, a copy of Stephen King's The Stand and a copy of Stephen King's It. I read them, I own them, and I even traded one of them in a little free library because I got a good book, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna put this out there for somebody. They'll appreciate that because it's hard to find real gems in the little free libraries. So you should check that out. So here are my baseball books that I got. The first one I got, this was the only one I actually got on Friday. So I went twice. Sunday I loaded up, but Friday was like members only, and I think I've seen this around. It's a short book. Usually I don't read short books, but I figured this will be fun. And it is Michael Shara's For Love of the Game. I knew it was a book, didn't know it was a book back when I saw it when it first came out. I didn't remember seeing it in theaters, but I thought this should be a fun baseball read. This, I don't know that I have in my collection. I might, but I got it because I also thought if I do have it in my collection, I can give it away to somebody. It's called Game 163, the epic 2007 wildcard tiebreaker, and the Rockies team that went to the World Series by Denny Dressman. So this is a cool little book. It even has all the postseason, or has the details from the game. Bottom of the third, Rockies batting behind 3-5. Padres, Jake Peavy facing 3-4-5 in the lineup. Coincidentally, that was when Todd Helton hit a solo home run to make it 4-5. I'm just flipping through this book. So haven't read it, have it in my collection, I think. But if you don't have this, reach out to me on social media and maybe this copy will be yours. This book I've never seen before. I assume it's a baseball book. It does say win ball games, but had an interesting cover. Again, I basically paid 25 cents for all these books. It's called The Juju Rules, or How to Win Ball Games from Your Couch, a memoir of an obsessed fan. It's got a little bobblehead on it. It does have blurbs on the back from Tony La Russa, Jonathan Eag, who wrote Luckiest Man, The Life and Death of Lou Gehrig. So no idea what this book is. This is kind of interesting. And then I saw this book on Friday, and I thought if it's still around on Sunday, I got to scoop it. I don't know if this is the sort of prototypical or the best book on this man's life, because not every great Hall of Famer has a biography written about them. But I do believe there is another Hank Greenberg book. This one's called The Hero of Heroes by John Rosengren. So I had to scoop that up. In the chat, I need that book. Yeah, I don't see that book around very often. The Game 163 book. That's kind of a rarity. And is it just about that game? Sure, but there's going to be background information. As I was flipping through, I saw something about Colorado Sky Sox, so it's going to give you a little bit of a biography of each player in that game. And look, other than the wild card win at Wrigley Field in 2018, which nothing happened after that, got swept by the Brewers. Yes, there was the run to the World Series, but the World Series itself fell flat, getting swept. Game 163 is kind of the big moment in Rockies history. And so if you're going to write a book about one game in Rockies history, that's a great one to pick. This is not a baseball book, but I'm trying to remember Jim Thorpe's baseball history. I think he might have played professionally, but Jim Thorpe, David Moranis, he wrote one of my favorite biographies about Roberto Clemente. So, I mean, this is a big ass book, but I don't mind a big ass book. So, Path Lit by Lightning, all about Jim Thorpe. Someday, maybe I'll get to it. And then only a couple left. I'm not sure how many of you know about Babe Didrikson Zaharias. This one's called Wonder Girl. Never seen this before. Beautiful cover. I love. I don't know if you can really pick up the color of green that this is, but Babe Didrikson Zaharis, I believe when ESPN did in the year 2000, it was like the 100 greatest athletes of the past century. Babe Didrikson Zaharis was in the top 5. She might have even been number 2. Amazing athlete. She did play some professional baseball, not minor league baseball. It was more like barnstorming games. In fact, there was a photograph that I saw in here for when she played with a very notable barnstorming team called House of David. And just she was an amazing athlete. She was a professional golfer. She did track and field events, and she was just an incredible athlete. This book I've never heard of. I'm not sure what it is. I think this is going to be a gift for my father-in-law, and it doesn't even have a name on the cover. It's just Mickey Mantle, number 7, and it has a warning on it, like it's a pack of cigarettes. It says, "Warning: Mickey says if y'all don't want to read about sex, don't buy this book." It's just called 7, the Mickey Mantle novel by Peter Gollenbach. He also helped write Johnny Damon's book and Bronx Zoo by Sparky Lyle. I'm not even sure if this is a book of fiction or if this is a conversation with Mickey Mantle, but I'd never seen it before, and the cover is stark. I mean, it doesn't even say what it is on the cover. Thought that was interesting. That was another one of those 25-cent pickups. And then last but not least, one of the greatest baseball stories of all time. We can agree on. There's many versions of them, but this one was a cool one. I picked it up because I said, I don't know that I have a copy of this in my collection. I do have a book written about all the different versions, which I've never read. Again, I like collecting books more than I like reading them, and I like reading books. But this is Casey at the Bat, A Ballad of the Republic, sung in the year 1988. So it's kind of a children's book. And the pages just have all kinds of detail. The artwork is fantastic. Pencil sketches. It's a beautiful book. But I thought about, do I want to get it? And before I even decided if I wanted to get it or not and put it in my bag, as I was running low on space, I noticed this sticker on the front which said autographed copy by the illustrator Christopher Bing, and it's signed there on the inner jacket or the first page. So I said, okay, well, I guess I'm going to get that. So that was my baseball haul of a lot of different things. I think there was really only like maybe 3 books that I got this weekend that I was like, I'm looking for this. I really want to read Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. I've been going down the book talk rabbit hole. If you do a lot of book talk stuff, and I don't do a ton of sci-fi, believe it or not. I don't do that. And I don't do history, but Lonesome Dove is like, it's on everybody's list of greatest books of all time. They had that. I was able to get that. And then 2 autobiographies that I figured I'll get around to it at some point. Scar Tissue by Anthony Kiedis. I'd read Flea's Acid for the Children earlier this year. I'd just gotten that for Christmas. And the Keith Richards biography that put out, was kind of an instant classic. So I'm looking forward to actually reading those, and plenty of other ones I might have to give away, trade them in a little free libraries, you name it. But I've been looking forward to this weekend for a while. And so nerded out, got far too many books. I don't know where I'm going to put them. If you listen to the Rockies Insider podcast, you heard me confess to having close to 300 vinyl records in my collection. I just started collecting vinyl a year ago. It hasn't even been a year. They did have some vinyl records, believe it or not, at the book sale. They were 50 cents each, and I didn't get a ton, partially because some of them were classical. Some of them were in really bad shape. So I only picked up a couple. This massive Herb Alpert thing. I think I have probably all of Herb Alpert's music. It's a nice little mood music to play in the background. So I have an addictive personality, and I'm frugal. And so when those 2 things come together, I'm going to get more things than I actually want or need, but it fills that need. It fills that for sure. And Luke, yes, you missed it, but that's all right. Yes, Sunday evenings, I hate doing shows this late because then when I cut up all my audio for the week, It just gives me a late jump on Monday morning, but you're good about asking the questions over on YouTube. Luke will back me up. If you ask a question on any video over on the Rockies Insider on YouTube, I will give you an answer. And if you're live in the chat, I'll give you an answer too. What's a perfect album in your opinion? That's a loaded question. But for me, for when I grew up, and something that I go back to and listen to a million times, and although it fits outside the radius of vinyl, because I really don't want to collect a lot of modern vinyl, and I don't have any modern vinyl. In fact, the only more, kind of modern vinyl that I have is Beastie Boys. Is it Ill Communication? Not Ill Communication. It's not Paul's Boutique, but I got it at a crazy cheap discount. And so I said, okay, let me scoop that up. So 85 is probably the most recent I'll go with a vinyl record, maybe even up to the 1990, but this goes after that. But I think this would be an exception because it probably is my favorite album of all time. That would be the Blue Album by Weezer. Big alternative rock fan, indie rock. Weezer's not indie rock. They might have been maybe when they first started out. I mean, Pinkerton's is a cult classic album. Their second album that was totally poo-pooed at the time. It's obviously found its audience now. It's cult classic. But for me, top to bottom, it would be the Blue Album by Weezer. Do want to own that on vinyl, but I like spending 50 cents, $1, maybe $5 on a classic album from the 60s up through the 80s. I'll pay that. But I'm a frugal dude and I want a good collection. I want quality. I want quantity, but I don't want to pay a lot. I don't want to spend a lot for a muffler. So despite my large collection, I haven't paid a ton for it because I'm a frugal SOB, as you can tell from the books that I picked out for 25 cents. That's just kind of how I roll. Don't hold it against me. But if you do, you know where to hold it against me at Patrick D. Lyons, at Patrick D. Lyons MLB on X, on Blue Sky. On Blue Sky and on the Rockies Insider channel over on YouTube. Appreciate you dropping by. Appreciate all the wonderful momentum you've provided me. But unfortunately, that kind of momentum, it can only be as good as my next show. So, of course, I will talk to you tomorrow. Thanks for dropping by, y'all. Time to get a lozenge.